Hey, I'm Andrew Lloyd Fry, and this is an introduction to Ravel. So we're going to be talking about his life, some of the things about his music that are unique, and three pieces, if you're new to Ravel, that I recommend you start listening with. So let's talk about his life a little bit. So he was a French composer. He entered the conservatory in 1895, and that was initially because he won a piano competition. So initially it was a lot of like piano, entering the conservatory as a pianist. And I think pretty quickly it was probably clear that he wasn't going to like make it. Just in that regard, just the people around him were probably like a lot more dedicated, a lot better. So he did that for several years till he was expelled. And he was expelled, I think there's a combination of reasons, but the big one is he had, in all that time, he had yet to win another prize. So that's kind of the stated reason why he was expelled. So then he came back a couple years later, and now he's strictly as a composition student, and not as like a concert pianist. And there was a prestigious prize of the day called the Prix de Rome, and he applied for that competition 5 years in a row, and he lost every year. And they expelled him. So he didn't win a competition, so he was expelled again. And as a student, it seems like he kind of had a lot of headbutting with authority and kind of wanted to be his own teacher, I think, in a way, is kind of how it's talked about. So by that point, I think he had already had probably everything he needed. And a big thing that he got from that experience was connections with other people. So he had a group, they were called the Apaches, of like-minded composers and musicians. And so I think he already had enough when he was expelled the second time, and he was connected to different organizations that were already playing his music. So I think it was probably fine that he was kicked out. So couple things before we talk about some specific pieces. I want to talk about the term Impressionism in classical music. So we have these different periods in classical music: Baroque, Classical, Romantic, and Impressionism. Now, I think it's a little bit of maybe a subcategory, or not as dominant as those other groups, because it's mostly defined by the work of two composers. And it's more than that, but it's predominantly defined by Debussy and Ravel. Debussy also being French, and they knew each other. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And I think there's multiple things that make something sound impressionistic. So there's some very technical musical things that both of them started doing that just gave it a different feel. So one of them was like using denser chords. So before that, it's like you're mostly using triads, and then you're using the dominant seventh sometimes. And they were just using sevenths and ninths and 13th chords like all over the place. So that just immediately gave it this very different feel. And both of them did not follow a lot of the long established rules of counterpoint and music composition that had just been passed down for a long time. So like chords moving in parallel motion, it's like that was not like technically allowed, and both of them were doing like a lot of things like that. So there's these technical things that were happening. I think an easier way to even think about it, though, is I feel like impressionistic music just has a totally different emotional feeling than romantic. And impressionistic I think of as like a little more intuitive and dreamy and mystical. So just those kinds of words, a little bit more like poetic in a way, and romantic, what came before it, just feels like very like stern and like deep psychological journeys, like much more serious. And for me, impressionistic music has this really high value of this like sensuous beauty, and often like from nature. A lot of the times, that's like the inspiration where it's coming from. So to go a little bit more into Ravel and Debussy's relationship, so they knew each other. Debussy was I think he was a little over 10 years older, so he was a little bit ahead of him. And Ravel is like an early supporter of Debussy, and even there's some concert experiences where like a lot of the critics are really upset about Debussy's music, and Ravel is like this staunch college kid supporting Debussy. And they knew each other. I think there was a season where they were like cordially knew each other, and then over time I think it kind of went a little sour, and there's a couple reasons for that. So Debussy borrowed a score of one of Ravel's pieces, and then one of his pieces later, Ravel felt like he pretty much ripped off his music. So I don't know how accurate that is, if that was just ideas in the air, but that wasn't helpful for their relationship. And then I think also Ravel probably did not like being like the next Debussy, or like, oh, he's just like following Debussy's footsteps. So I think Debussy had a huge influence on Ravel, but Ravel also had a big influence on Debussy. So I think he probably didn't like this feeling of like teacher and student, and they were more peers, but maybe Debussy was a little bit farther ahead. Now I would say there are some Ravel pieces, specifically his piano pieces, that I love. Probably his piano pieces I love the most. They sound like Debussy. Like it's, I don't know, it's very, very similar. So once Debussy died, which was during World War I, I think about 1914, Ravel became like the prominent French classical composer. So it was kind of like both of them, but probably Debussy was probably the number one, and then Ravel took that place. Now, a couple general things about Ravel's music that I think are interesting and what makes it more like effective and fun to listen to. So for me, there is this window in time where most of the classical music I love, or I should say a lot of the classical music I love, was written in this certain window. And it's at the beginning of the 1900s, and that's when all this music was written. And Romanticism is ending, and things are getting looser. So just some of those strict rules are kind of falling away, but things kept getting looser and looser and looser, and they went to, like more atonal. And there's this window where it's like loose, but not too loose. And this is just like personal preference. And Ravel is like right in the middle of that period, and everything he wrote is like in that window that I really like, and it feels less stiff, more fresh, less classically cliche, but still beautiful. And there's a whole host of emotional expressions in his music, and as music got looser and looser, it feels like it lost its ability to express all kinds of emotions. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that's really interesting about Ravel is he is this odd mix of old and new. So he, very high value on technical accuracy. Mozart was his favorite composer. And I think that balance in him really brought, this is just a really nice combination of both innovation and not always following the rules, but also this really high respect. And he's like constantly studying scores and stuff like that. And then the third thing is Ravel's really notable for his orchestration. So interestingly, often he would write the piece, and it would be a piano work, and it, instead of that just being like this rough draft, for the piece, that would be its own piece. And maybe it would be years, and then it would be orchestrated. But just his craft of orchestration kind of reminds me of Duke Ellington, where it's like, it feels like your instrument is the whole orchestra, and just the way he balanced things and brought in different instruments. It's really rich, and that's a big thing just to appreciate and enjoy when you're listening to his music. Okay, so let's talk about 3 of his pieces. The first piece I want to talk about is a string quartet in F major. So he wrote this, he was pretty young, 28. And I would say this is probably my favorite string quartet of all time. It's like, you just put it on and you start it, and it's one of those pieces where it's just like, and it's just like getting in a hot tub or getting in bed at the end of a tired day. Couple things about this. This is a piece that maybe people have heard but without knowing. So it was in the movie Royal Tenenbaums, if you've ever seen that. I think it's the second movement that's predominantly pizzicato, and that's the one that's in there. Also, this movement has some odd time signature stuff, which is fun to listen to. So that's the first one. The second one is more his like mid-career, and it's Daphnis and Chloe. So this was a piece commissioned by the Ballet Russe and run by Diaghilev. So crazily, Diaghilev commissioned the Firebird, Petrushka, the Rite of Spring, and this. So he's probably one of the most influential people in classical music without being a composer himself. So it was a ballet for orchestra, and it also had a chorus. And what's notable is the chorus does not sing words, just notes. So this is his biggest work. It's about an hour, and it's both the longest and requires the most amount of people. And for a lot of people, this is his masterwork. And you really get to hear that orchestration on display. This piece has so much, I would call it sparkling beauty. It's just like so beautiful and rich and lovely. Yeah. And then obviously the wordless chorus, it just adds this other element where, you have like a bunch of people, but it's just used as a voice versus communicating words. And then the last piece I want to go over, this is late career, is Bolero. So this one is notable because it's kind of completely turning musical values on its head. So it's pretty much harmonically stagnant. I think it's about 15 or 17 minutes. So it does not go anywhere harmonically. And it has this melody, but the melody is like super long. It's just like a really long cycle to get through the whole thing, but it never changes the whole time. It just stays the same. So there is zero development, which is not super crazy in music, but that's super crazy in classical music, for it to not like introduce this idea and then develop it and take it through these process. It's just like, this is the melody the whole time. So it's a little bit like proto-minimalism in its own way. But what happens is across the whole piece, it's constantly getting louder. So it starts quiet, pretty low, and it's just this huge, essentially this like huge crescendo. And he continually is reorchestrating it. So this is another really good example of that like orchestration skill on technique, and he's keeping it interesting by continuing to reorchestrate it. Now this piece, I think to his chagrin, is probably his most popular work. Like everyone always loved it, even from the beginning, and I think that took him aback a little bit. And he said he didn't even think like normal like orchestras would play this piece just because of those values are different. But it's great. It's a really fun piece to listen to. All right, hope you enjoy listening.